In this video, you're going to learn the very basics of TypeScript and different things like why a lot of people use it instead of JavaScript and things like types and why they're important. And I did try to make this video as short as possible, so make sure to watch all of it to not miss anything out. Before we get started, make sure to like this video if you learned something new. Comment down below if you have any questions or if you have anything else that you'd like to say. And without wasting any more time, let's get started. And I do want to go over why TypeScript is better than JavaScript real quick. So as we all know, JavaScript is a powerful programming language, but it can be unpredictable, which is where TypeScript comes in handy, since it adds type safety, and it also catches errors before your code even runs, and it makes your development process smoother and more reliable. If you've ever spent hours chasing a silly bug, TypeScript might just be your new best friend. But now let's go ahead and actually create our project and learn some TypeScript. To start off, go to your desktop, right-click anywhere, press on Open in Terminal, and we're going to create a React project using Vite. So let's run npx create Vite at latest, and I'm going to call this TypeScript, but you can call this whatever you want. So TypeScript. Here we're going to choose React, and the first option, which is going to be TypeScript, and now we're going to cd to that project, so TypeScript, and we're going to run npm install. Once that's done, we can run code period, which is going to open this folder in VS Code. And so I've put the browser on the right so that we can also have the code on the left and not switch between tabs, but we're going to go and remove all of this boilerplate code that we're not going to need. So remove the CSS files. I'm going to remove this index.css import. Same goes in here. And actually we can remove all of these imports. Same goes with the hook. So let's go ahead and do that. And in the return, let's return an h1. That's just going to say hello there, or hello world. And let's run the project to make sure that everything works properly. So let's open it. Here's going to be our hello world. And now we're going to open developer tools by holding Control-Shift-I or right-clicking and pressing on inspect. But the first thing that I want to go over is going to be variable types. So in JavaScript, if you want to create a variable, you would just write const and then set the name. And then for example, num was 5. And the very first error that we see is num is assigned a value but never used. So let's go ahead and console log it num, and now we're going to be getting our number. Now since this is TypeScript, this is going to be called an implicit type because TypeScript has to guess the type of variable that this is based on the value that we have put in there. So in this case it's a number, and then if we add quotations around the 5, then it's going to be a string, as we can see over here. But the main reason of why you would ever use TypeScript is assign a type to a variable. So in this case we want this to be a number. To do that, we would write colon after we assign the name of the value, and then I'm going to write number in here since I want this to be a number. And now if we add colons in here and save, we're getting a string, but we can see that we have this very basic error that says type string is not assignable to type number. And whenever you have larger projects, this is what makes TypeScript really useful. It gives you errors like this. But now I want to go over another example. So let's create a component. I'm going to call this greetings. Here we're going to be getting our props. And then we will return an h1 that's going to say hello, or actually let's just get a name in here instead of props. So hello, and then the name. Here we're going to change this to greetings, just like that. And currently we're just going to get a hello, and of course we have an error because name is missing. So let's write name, and we can set this to Bob, or really whatever you want. And we can see that our code works, but we still have an error here because we haven't set a type, which means that it's an implicit type. So the type of variable now depends on the value that it gets. But to add a type, there's a few different ways to do that. We can declare a type. So it's kind of like creating a variable before types. And we can just say greetings props, or prop in this case. And then name is going to be string. And now we can set this to be greetings prop. And now there's no errors, which means that we can also add a few other ones. So we can set age to be a number. So age, let's just set that to 40. Now we can go in here and add the age. So hello this, and then we can say your age, and here's our age. But now let's just say that we didn't have an age, so I'm going to comment this out. And now we can see all of our errors. So we have our type name instead of greetings prop, but we don't have an age. And again, this is why TypeScript is really useful for when it comes to debugging, because this kind of stuff can save you a lot of time. So a very easy to fix is just add it back, and now there's no errors. We can set this to string, and now we can see our error in here because all that we're doing in here is getting our variables based on this type. But now since this type is set to string and we're setting it to be a number, we're getting an error here because we set it to a number instead of a string. So I hope that you're starting to see why TypeScript is useful, but there's also a different way to write this. So if you don't want to create a type, you can create it in here. So you can say that you want name to be string and then age to be a string or a number. So number, and we can comment this out now. And now there's no errors. But then if we set this to a string, the age, we can see that we're going to get this error again. So again, to fix it, we can go back to number and there's no more errors. Now, let's say that I wanted to do the same thing with a hook. Well, we can go in here, for example, inside of our greeting, create a hook. So const count, or actually, I'm just going to create it in here. So const count, set count. This is going to be set to 0. Here, I'm going to create a div, put greetings here, and then we can add a button, which is going to say count, and then on click, set count to be count plus 1. Now whenever we press on it, we can see that the number goes up. But in this case, we haven't set our use state to be any type of variable. So if I set this to be a string and we try to run the code, we can see that it's just going to add once in here because we haven't added a type in here and it's not checking for any of that. But if we did add a type by adding our less than and greater than symbol, and in here writing number, we can see that we're getting in there that this is a string, even though it has to be a number, and it tells us that it has to be a number. So if I set this back to a number, we can see that this works. Same goes if we set this to a string, so string, and then now we can see the error, which means that it has to be a string, and now everything works, but the other way around. But let's just say that here, this was type number, and we set count to be a string. So in here, I'm going to say hello, and we can already see the error because we're setting count, which has a type of number, to be a string, which doesn't match. So of course, it's going to show us an error. But if we go back, of course, there's going to be no errors because we're setting it to be a number. And I'm really hoping that you're starting to see the pattern of how TypeScript works and the amount of time it can save you while you're debugging your code. But of course, there's more complicated stuff that you can do, which I'm not really going to go over in this video because, again, this is just the very basics. But I just want to show you how we can do the same thing with arrays and objects. So let's just say type user, and then in here we're going to have a name, which is going to be string. Then let's just say hobbies, and in this case it's going to be a string of arrays, or you can set this to be a number of arrays. Or another thing they can do is just write array of strings. So as you can see, there's different ways to write it, but usually the easiest one is just write string of arrays. And then let's just say to create an object, let's say animals, and then this would just be an object. So in here, if I created a new user, I would have to use type of user. So let's just capitalize the U in user. And then here we can set name to Bob, hobbies to be coding, and then animals. And here let's console log it. So user, and we can see that there's going to be no errors. But as soon as I try to add a number inside of hobbies, so let's just say 5, we can see that there's an error because we haven't assigned a type. So we can remove that from here. And then again, there's different ways to do this, but hopefully you understand how TypeScript works now. But again, this is just a very basic video of how TypeScript works, but I am going to make a full Next.js project with TypeScript, so make sure that you subscribe to not miss any of that out. But if you have any ideas or requests for videos, then of course, make sure to leave a comment down below because that really helps out with making these videos. But this is where we're going to end it. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. And again, subscribe to this channel to not miss any upcoming content like this. Comment down below if you have any questions, and hopefully see you in the next video.